Hello and welcome to America Can We Talk? I'm Debbie Georgatos. Thanks so very much for tuning into my show. Today we'll talk about three stories. One, another Trump derangement syndrome meltdown because he said he'd do what Hillary tried to do. Number two, Bernie explains socialism, see California and bubonic plague. And three, Biden bungles his presidential bid. I can't wait to tell you about that. And last, of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
And hello again, and again, welcome to America Can We Talk? And to today's first five. Washington is all in a meltdown over a statement or several statements that President Trump made in an interview with George Stephanopoulos. And I want to play what Trump said and then talk about what in the world the left finds so wrong with it. But let's first hear what President Trump said, I think it was this morning or yesterday, to George Stephanopoulos.
Foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it. But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
Folks, this little interview clip has been on every news site and all sorts of punditry, meltdowns. In fact, even some Republicans in the United States Senate, Lindsey Graham as an example, contradicted the president, said essentially that's terrible. If some other country came to him with Oppo research on his political opponent, that Lindsey Graham said, of course you run right to the FBI. I'm going to run, this is just Trump derangement syndrome on steroids. This is ridiculous. Let's start with the fact. Why are we all discussing the entire Trump-Russia collusion hoax? The whole Mueller frame-up, the whole FBI frame-up of President Trump. We're discussing it because during the 2016 presidential campaign, when Hillary Clinton really wanted to win, she hired Perkins Coie law firm, which hired Fusion GPS, which hired Christopher Steele to dig up dirt about her opponent, President Trump. She, Hillary Clinton, engaged in opposition research, which is as old as time itself. Candidates digging up dirt on each other. Opposition research, sad but true, is just obviously what happens in almost every election we've had. On top of that, Hillary ends up with research from Russia, from Christopher Steele digging up dirt about President Trump in Russia. She was going to use that dirt to try to destroy him. She did use that dirt to try to destroy him. So we don't have any discussion out of the Mueller team, out of the FBI, about whether or not Hillary's conduct was problematic, but she was perfectly willing to take information from the Russians to destroy her political opponent. The idea, the naivete, the silly level naivete that there is never any contact between foreign countries and political candidates is absurd. The idea, all Trump said is, President Trump said is, if someone came to me, Norway, any country, and had information about my opponent, the question Stephanopoulos asked was, would you accept it? Would you take it? Would you listen to it? You'd have to be crazy to say no. I mean, you'd have to be crazy to say, no, I don't think I better hear what you have to say. I'd rather lose the election than get information from you. The whole concept of finding Oppo research that may have been conducted by a foreign power that you're just going to reject it and put your fingers in your ears and say, no, 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 don't tell me, I'm going to run to the FBI, is absurd. Now, I have not worked on the federal campaign at this level, but I'm going to, or in a, you know, and for anyone in Congress, but I'm going to tell you, the people in Congress, the people who run for House and Senate, who have international connections, who have all sorts of people on their team, the idea that foreign country representatives might come to you and say, hey, we have a lot of scoop on so-and-so. The idea that doesn't happen is absurd. This is another Trump derangement, meltdown syndrome. And on top of that, I want to remind you that it was President Obama in the year 2015 who, without apology and with no condemnation from everyone who's clutching their pearls in Washington today and wringing their hands and acting like they'd never heard anything so outrageous, it was Obama who sent a team over to Jerusalem, to the country of Israel, in 2015 to undermine Netanyahu's re-election campaign. So somehow Obama can actually engage in interference in a foreign country's elections, and everyone goes, well, you know, that's Obama, that's a Democrat, can't talk about that, no one's going to criticize that. But all Trump was asked was, would you talk to somebody, would you listen to what they had to say if they had information? And President Trump did say he might go to the FBI, he might give it to them. You know, it depends, I assume, he didn't embellish, but it depends what the information is and how it was obtained and whether it appeared to President Trump that the country presenting it was really trying to interfere in America's elections. Let me make a distinction there. During the 2016 election cycle, what the conduct that Mueller looked into included looking into that Russia had apparently purchased some fake identities on Facebook, had engaged in Facebook ads, manipulation to interfere with our election. Most of what Mueller found was that what Russia was doing was just trying to stir up the American population to divide us against each other, to depict America as a racist country, a whole bunch of things that the effort really of the Russians was to just unsettle American society. So that level of interference, you know, Trump was not responding to that kind of question. He wasn't responding, what if you discovered they were hacking data from the server of the Democrat Party? What would you do? He wasn't responding to that. The question he had from Stephanopoulos was, if they came to you with Apple research, would you take it? And folks, he and everyone who's ever run for president in this country, the right answer is yes. Would do it, may have done it, would do it again. And Trump didn't say he'd never go to the FBI. It depends what he was told. But really, this has gotten to the point of absurdity in this country. Trump cannot say anything without being attacked, even after we're just finished with an investigation where the entire accusation against him with having colluded with the Russians was thrown out because there was nothing to it. And now we're discovering, the country's discovering, that the actual beginning of the entire Russia-Trump collusion hoax was cooked up by the FBI. So this whole idea that Trump gave the most absurd answer ever, that of course you'd run to the FBI with anything you're told, just silly level, tiresome. Honestly, I was kind of warming up Lindsey Graham, but he quickly trotted out to get some media attention and say, oh no, you got to run to the FBI. What Trump was asked was, would you go to the FBI if some country had information about your opponent? And the answer, the correct answer, and the only answer is, of course. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. Now I want to turn to a story that, this is just a, we're in the coming up and not coming up on next year, over a year away, 2020, we have the presidential elections coming. And, we have numerous people on the Democrat side running. I think we're up to 24, might even be 25, but here we are. Well, Bernie Sanders gave a very significant campaign speech at George Washington University, I think over the weekend. And I want to actually dissect it, not just because to draw attention to what he says, but also I want to draw attention to some things that I think people, candidates on the Republican side, people who love freedom, people who love liberty, people who understand the importance of liberty, need to listen closely to how Bernie Sanders is selling socialism. We need to pay close attention to the way he is depicting what his Democrat socialism is. Really dig in to understand what he's saying and be ready on the conservative side, on the pro-America side, on the pro-free market side, to respond to the points he's making. Because he, even though right now Biden's ahead of him in polling, Bernie Sanders did very, very well in the 2016 primary. He may even have won it had the Democrat Party not interfered. But Bernie Sanders is really beginning to shape some thinking in the millennial generation. And this is a very substantive speech. It wasn't one of the ones where he's just spouting off and, outside and he's too hot and he looks crazy. He made a pretty coherent speech. I want to play some segments of it, and my incredibly wonderful producer, Matt, is giving me a thumbs up. We do have all the, okay, so we had a little trouble collecting some of these clips, but I think it's so important to understand what Bernie Sanders said and then to talk about. So let's just start with, this is the very beginning of Bernie Sanders' speech. This is at George Washington University, Washington, D.C., just a couple of days ago. Here he is.
Well, President Trump tries to make the Democratic race all about him and maybe a little bit of Biden. There are candidates out in the field pursuing a lot of other topics: jobs, criminal justice, taking on Wall Street. That's something Bernie Sanders raised in a major address today explaining democratic socialism.
They may hate democratic socialism because it benefits working people, but they absolutely love corporate socialism that enriches Trump and other billionaires.
And actually, there's the next one where he's, do we already go through there's another little mini clip right in there with Bernie Sanders? No, okay. That's all right. We have a little trouble communicating about our clips. But anyway, what Bernie Sanders' point was, and let me just dive into one of the points I think is really important for Republicans to pick up on. Bernie Sanders made the point that many, many times Republicans or conservatives attack socialism, and what he's calling democratic socialism, he's saying is socialism that helps the everyday guy, the working guy. What he then says, and I think this is we have to be careful about, Bernie Sanders is saying to these students at George Washington, to America, yeah, but Trump loves corporate socialism. And he goes through and lists what he means by that. And this is one thing I wanted to hit on. He pointed back to the bailouts. He pointed back to the time that in America we decided, it was actually under George Bush, to bail out the auto industry, to bail out banks. They had problems with the loans they had made. And he's calling that corporate socialism. And he's also talking about how Wall Street is very protected by Washington, especially by Republicans. I think there's a need I think Republicans should be asked and should talk about, what is it exactly that you think tax dollars should be used for in terms of saving businesses, of saving corporations? Because the argument Sanders is making is, well, if we're going to use tax dollars in a socialistic way to save things, save the individual. He wants to have universal basic income and huge welfare programs, and everybody's education is paid for, and everybody's health care is paid for. And he's saying we shouldn't be bailing out corporations. I happen to agree. I didn't agree with the auto industry bailout. I think that was a mistake. I didn't agree with the banking industry bailouts. Both of those were really the government stepping in, and I'm sure they argue they were protecting the people ultimately by keeping these large institutions afloat, but they really were using tax dollars to save businesses. And Bernie Sanders is saying, hey, this is corporate socialism. Why is this so great? What about his version of socialism, saving the individual? I think he's making points that are going to resonate with young people, and I think that there should be an answer on our side. Do we agree? And I'll tell you something else along these lines that has become blurry to some Republican politicians. Once Obamacare passed, and we had the idea of Obamacare, essentially the government was compelling insurance industries, companies to provide certain policies, setting the rates, setting what you had to cover, and the insurance companies became entangled with the government. They became entangled with the government in terms of, well, we can't sell this policy unless it's for this amount. So we had the government dictating the contents of insurance policies. If the companies wanted to participate in the exchanges, and then we had, and I will tell you this story very briefly about a Republican congressman I happen to know pretty well. I was arguing to him, a one-to-one, We need to repeal Obamacare. We need to get the government out of the insurance industry. The government has no business dictating to insurance companies what you have to cover, how much you can charge for it, how you structure your policies. That's not the job of the government. This Republican congressman said to me, essentially, look, the insurance companies like it. They're used to it. They don't want to be freed to participate in private sector and in the free market private sector economy. They don't want it. They're happy being under the control of the federal government. And that this was out of a Republican congressman's mouth. And I'm telling you the story to say this is very easy, like a slippery slope, where you see where in healthcare, as an example, insurance companies always heavily regulated. To be clear, they were regulated, and they would need to be regulated to some degree about transparency and honesty and all that. But what happens when you have the government taking over industries like they did the healthcare industry and the insurance industry in the Obamacare years, which we're still in, they ended up having insurance companies dependent on the government, becoming comfortable with being dependent on the government, being comfortable with the idea that they were going to be able to protect themselves from their consumers, from the serious kind of decision making that free markets require, figuring out what do people want in policies, what can we offer that will meet the needs of people who need insurance and will also be financially viable. This congressman is arguing to me, hey, they don't want to anymore. They're comfortable, all cozy with the government. I think that to respond in part to what Bernie Sanders is saying, and we're going to play another clip of his in a moment, but to respond to what he's saying, we have to be able to say what we think is or is not legitimate in terms of how much control government has and therefore how much socialism is involved in this this collusion, this connection between the government and industry. So, heading back to the Bernie Sanders speech at Georgetown, he was, first of all, he was getting lots of applause. Of course, you know, he's at George Washington. He's at George Washington. A lot of applause, a lot of excitement about what he was saying. But there was another clip he had in there. He was talking. He's really channeling FDR. So first, I'm going to play this little clip of there was FDR. Who gave a statement that was played on this newscast, and then we'll follow it with what Bernie Sanders had to say. So first we have FDR, and you can just follow right on with what Sanders said.
Never before in all our history have these forces been so united against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
For in all our history have these forces been so united against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
Okay, folks, this is near the beginning of his speech, and later in this speech, and I'm going to play it for you because I want to have you understand how serious Bernie Sanders is about bringing a radical form of socialism to America, how he spells it out in convincing college students that he's the one that they should support, and how enticing his promises can be unless you're armed with facts. Bernie Sanders is essentially reintroducing FDR-style thinking, FDR socialism. He views FDR as an icon of American history, someone who will be honored by the audiences listening to him. So I want to have you play next, Matt, if you would, the next clip of Bernie Sanders. This is from his full speech. It's a bit of a lengthy clip, but I want you to hear what he's promising America, what he says he stands for in terms of being the presidential candidate who's going to bring democratic socialism to America.
And that is the difference between Donald Trump and me. He believes in corporate socialism for the rich and powerful. I believe in a democratic socialism that works for the working families of this country. What I believe is that the American people deserve freedom, true freedom. Freedom is an often used word, but it is time that we took a hard look at what that word actually means. Ask yourself, what does it really mean to be free? Are you truly free if you are unable to go to a doctor when you are sick or face financial bankruptcy when you leave the hospital? Are you truly free if you cannot afford the prescription drugs you need in order to stay alive? Are you truly free when you spend half of your limited income on housing and are forced to borrow money from a payday lender at 200% interest rates? Are you truly free if you are 70 years old and forced to work because you lack a pension or enough money to retire? Are you truly free if you are unable to go to a college or a trade school because your family lacks the income? Are you truly free if you are forced to work 60 or 80 hours a week because you cannot find a job that pays you a living wage? Are you truly free if you are a mother with a newborn baby, but you are forced to go back to work immediately after the birth of that child because you lack paid family leave? Are you truly free if you are a small business owner or a family farmer who is driven out of business by the monopolistic practices of big business? Are you truly free if you are a veteran who has put his or her life on the line to defend this country and tonight will be sleeping out on the streets? To me, the answer to those questions in the wealthiest nation on earth is no. Under those conditions, you are not truly free. While the Bill of Rights protects us from the tyranny, FDR proposed an economic Bill of Rights, but he died a year later and was never able to fulfill that vision. Our job, 75 years later, is to complete what Roosevelt started. And that is why today I am proposing a 21st century economic Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights that establishes once and for all that every American, regardless of his or her income, is entitled to the right to a decent job that pays a living wage, the right to quality health care, the right to a complete education, the right to affordable housing, the right to a clean environment, and the right to a secure retirement. Over the course of this election, my campaign has been releasing and will continue to release detailed proposals addressing each of these yet to be realized economic rights. We will also address the attacks that are being launched every day against the civil rights and civil liberties of our people.
I would tell you, folks, I rarely play the clips from left-wingers in the show because my show is about advocating for freedom, the Constitution, limited government, free markets, the whole worldview that is the foundational view of America. That's what this show is about. And that was probably pretty painful for some of you who watch the show and listen, why we have to listen to Bernie Sanders. But I want you to hear how appealing his arguments were to that college crowd. And I want to go through some of the things he's talking about because this is incumbent on Republican politicians. It's incumbent on conservatives, think tank leaders, community leaders, bloggers, commentators, pundits. Everybody needs to be piling on, explaining the fallacy, the farce that is socialism, the farce of the ideas that Bernie Sanders is arguing for. And I want to hit some of them. We're going to have to talk about a lot of them between now and the election of 2020. But this speech you heard him say, this is insidious evil, power grab, couched in terms that sound like, my goodness, isn't he a great guy? Yes, I want to hear it. We have rights. And that was his word. Everybody in the country has a right. He's talking an economic Bill of Rights to a job, health care, education, a complete education in his words. affordable housing, clean environment, secure retirement. This is straight out socialism. And to be really clear, the only way any country can get to the point of providing those things to citizens is pure, brute economic force applied against the people, the producers, the workers, the people who have worked hard and saved and educated themselves and work and dream. The only way to provide those things that he is promising is brute economic force. It ultimately ends up being just like communism. They don't have to make communism official, make America have a communist party that's winning the election. If this agenda is embraced by America, the only way to get from America the free to America the Bernie socialist is a radical growth in the power of the federal government, a radical surrender of freedom by the American people, a radical surrender of all that we work so hard to earn in our lives. This is, you talk about a fundamental transformation. He makes Obama look like a right-winger. And what Bernie Sanders is proposing, I'm telling you, I got rattled by this speech. I printed it out, I read it. There are other pieces of it I'll be going back to over the next several weeks. But understand at least several reasons why his speech is so insidious, so evil, and so bad. Number one, economically. Even if in this country, even if you forced all billionaires, B as in boy billionaires, or even M as in Mary millionaires, all those people to liquidate all of their assets above $1 million. I'm not talking about just high tax rates. You couldn't even get close to funding what he wants to do with high tax rates. You'd have to start seizing wealth. You'd have to have the government begin to force Americans to liquidate their assets and send them the money into the federal government. But even if you did that, and this is a study that's been done, I wrote about it in my book, Ladies, Can We Talk? Even if you forced every billionaire and millionaire in this country to liquidate their assets, send everything into the government that exceeds the value of $1 million, you could not fund the current federal budget for more than 1 year. There isn't money to do what he is promising. There isn't money in the universe to do what he is promising. Let me just run through some specific numbers. This was months ago, even before some of his latest promises. But Stephen Moore, you may recognize that name. He's an economist. He's been on the show many times. He wrote a piece just trying to help Americans grasp what these promises would cost real America, working America. He started with Medicare for all, which is another way. Bernie Sanders is talking about quality health care. He's into Medicare for all, single payer. He doesn't care. He wants every single form of health care to be free to everyone. So Stephen Moore talks about Medicare for all. By some estimates, $32 trillion over just the next decade. 32 trillion in a program already on track to run out of money. Medicare is under its current structure, under the current structure of people who've paid in over the years and expect when they reach retirement to get money out. Medicare is already broke. But you'd have to find a way to fund just over the next 10 years. And that was a conservative estimate, $32 trillion. Then you have the Green New Deal, which Bernie Sanders is all wound up, all excited about. Just one piece of the Green New Deal. This idea, a low carbon electricity grid, one piece of the Green New Deal would be $5.4 trillion over 10 years, or $39,000 per household. The whole Green New Deal is something in the realm of like $92 trillion, just impossible to comprehend, full of free promises, free for everybody. The net zero emissions transportation system, another part of the Green New Deal, $2.7 trillion. Over, and I don't know if that's a year, over 10 years, or $20,000 per household, and another guaranteed green housing for everybody. Everybody's residence is going to meet the green housing standards. Guaranteed green housing, and an additional $4.2 trillion just to get there, just to accomplish that. The welfare programs. in the Green New Deal. Guaranteed jobs, universal health care would together cost each American family around $582,000. Each American family. Most American families don't even have $582,000 in their entire net worth. Or that would be, again, the cost would be of this Green New Deal, welfare programs, guaranteed job, universal health care, $80.6 trillion in total. And then you'd have, of course, the Green New Deal, loss of all the jobs. But on top of that, universal basic income, this idea that somehow you're just going to be paid money by the government, no matter what you do or don't do. If you do nothing, paid by the government, universal basic income. This would give families making less than $100,000, basically, $6,000 or something a year check. That expense would be, on top of free college tuition, $15 annual minimum wage, reparations, which Bernie Sanders and most of the Democrats running for president are open to. Folks, we're talking a pipe dream. We're talking a 5-year-old sitting down asked, what should everyone get for Christmas? And they would say, well, everyone should have a house and a car and a pony and toys. And this is childish on the part of Bernie Sanders. I don't know if he knows or doesn't know, but it doesn't even matter. What he's promising is fiscally not just extreme, it's fiscally impossible. And it is what happens when you have people in America, like those students sitting at George Washington, thinking somehow the government is the source of what I need. Government will take care of me. Government will take care of my retirement and my job and my housing and my food and my education. Everything is owed to me. So the first point of how crazy Bernie Sanders is that nothing he's saying is even remotely fiscally possible. It's not possible. It's not just a stretch, it's impossible. Second is what you do to a culture and a society when you plant the seed, as he is doing in those college students' minds. You plant the seed, you don't really have to figure out your life at all. You can just sit back and the government's going to make sure you have a job. Don't worry, we'll find you a job. He has this $15 an hour as the minimum wage, clearly not enough to live on, clearly going to have to be raised. Government's going to find you your job, provide your health care, give you a free education as far as you want to go in education, provide you affordable housing, provide you a clean environment, to put that one, the environment to the side, is a whole other set of issues, and provide for your retirement. What you're doing is robbing people who buy into this crazy of Bernie Sanders, robbing them of the development of the essential quality of adulthood of self-reliance, a sense of purpose, a sense of self-reliance, a sense of taking life by the horns. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to find my path and find my dream. He's telling them all, you don't have to do that. We take care of everything. People who live in socialist societies, in government-controlled economies, become helpless. They become dependent, exactly what the government wants them to do. Weak, dependent, helpless, unable to figure out how to get up in the morning without getting a memo from the government. This is what Bernie Sanders is creating for America. So not only is he creating an expectation of absurd ideas that no one could afford, secondarily, he is also creating a society. He's planting the seeds of a weakened society. We've had Lieutenant Colonel Alan West talking about this on the show. We've had other times we've gone through this point that when people live in societies where they're dependent on the government and finally freedom comes and the government gets off their back, people don't know how to be free. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to think through, where should I look for a job? How should I fund my education? How should I plan for my retirement? How should I pursue getting health insurance? How should I pursue health care? They become dependent. And the last thing I'll say in this, because I want to hit one more story today, is just you're hearing more and more stories out of California. We're going to have a California day next, or sometime soon, maybe next week. But in California, highest tax in the nation, free everything for everybody. I mean, they're now giving free health care to illegal aliens and education. This is a state, the highest taxed state in the country. Californians are successful Californians, hardworking Californians, income-earning Californians are fleeing the state. The state has more in debt, more promises, this whole mentality of socialism. And what they've got, I'm just going to plant the seed and turn to my next story, my last story for today. But we have in Los Angeles, we have this highest taxed, astonishingly highly taxed state. You have in Los Angeles the inability of the city government to keep the city clean, to collect garbage in a timely way, to collect the human waste left on the city streets, human feces and waste left on the streets, which is causing an actual health threat in Los Angeles. They have threats of serious concern about the outbreak of bubonic plague, something we wiped out, we thought, in human history centuries ago, back on the streets of Los Angeles because they don't have the money to do one of the few things government really should do for people, which includes collecting the trash, getting trash off the streets, keeping the city streets clean. We're going to talk more about the health threats in California next week or sometime soon, but understand when your mentality is Bernie Sanders, the government promises you everything. Think California. Bubonic plague in Los Angeles. They actually had, and I don't have her name quickly enough to come up with it, but they had a woman, a actual city employee who was a PhD, come down with, I think it was typhus. Typhus doesn't have any place in America, but it is on the rise, as they're calling them, medieval diseases on the rise in California because they can't fund simple things like taking care of cleaning up trash in Los Angeles because they buy into the Bernie Sanders left-wing socialist picture that somehow, if you just vote for them, everything can magically be free. And my one last story for today, folks, I want to turn and talk about Joe Biden, another one of our happy candidates for President of the United States. He is the leading candidate on the Democrat side, and he had a press conference or some sort of meeting recently where he spoke about, I'm going to play a very short clip of something he said. I'll let Matt, the wonderful producer, play this quick clip and they'll talk about Joe Biden.
I promise you, if I'm elected president, you're going to see the single most important thing that changes America is we're going to cure cancer.
Okay. Now, he's been taking a lot of heat for that. I think Joe Biden is a terrible candidate. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment. But I'm not really jumping on the bandwagon of criticizing him too much about that because, number one, he did lose a son to cancer, so it's very personal to him. And number two, many people running for president say things that are inspirational. They're aspirational. They want America to aspire to this or that. So maybe what he really meant was, I will dedicate serious resources on the federal level to cure cancer. I will encourage research to cure cancer. Maybe he really shouldn't be held to saying as though, I mean, he said the words, we're going to cure cancer, but maybe he just meant an aspirational thing. But I will tell you why and how Joe Biden deserves serious criticism. In fact, it makes him just unviable as a candidate. And that is this. Joe Biden said several times after the presidency of Barack Obama was over. And so, Biden, he's Obama's VP for 8 years, been there the whole time. He made some comments about how he was so proud of having served with President Obama because they had an administration that was scandal-free. And you could say, okay, but he wasn't running when he said that. Well, he said it again just a couple days ago. He said it again. Proud of having served in an administration, his words, that saw no hint of a scandal or a lie. No, Biden's words about the Obama years, no hint of a scandal or a lie. And I'm raising this to say, if this guy continues to be the front runner, there will be zero media coverage about the lies and the scandals of the Obama era. It will be incumbent on you, conservatives who listen to this show, serious pundits. It'll be up to the conservative media to point out the simple fact that the Obama years were horrific for America, number one, and number two, that Biden has to either be held to agreeing that some of the things Obama did were wrong and he disagreed, or stand by them. He, Joe Biden, must be held to account for what Obama the Obama presidency involved. He does not get a pass just to say, hey, you know, no hint of a scandal. Aren't you proud of us? I'm just going to run through a few of them. He actually used the word lie. So I just want to get this particular lie I'm about to mention, even from liberal websites, liberal sources of news, won one of the awards of Lie of the Year, Lie of the Decade, which was when President Obama looked America in the eye on camera and said, if they passed Obamacare, if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. These were flat out, bold-faced lies. They were not misstatements that later proved to be false. Plenty of research has shown at the time Obamacare was proposed, Obama's own team has admitted it. They knew that most of the policies in this country would not meet the standards for insurance policies being required by Obamacare. They knew they were going to drive people away from they were going to deprive people of their insurance policies and therefore of the doctors they wanted, forcing them into government-run health care, which they wanted. They knew it. He knew it was a lie when he said it. But that was probably one of the biggest whoppers. But I also want to mention Benghazi. During President Obama's term, 2 terms as president, Benghazi happened. Benghazi was not just a horrific and horrible abandonment by America of our own troops on the ground in Benghazi. Bad enough that we did not bring what has now been shown to be available resources in the area who could have swept in and saved those people killed in Benghazi, saved those American troops killed in Benghazi, those American assets. But the worst was the lies after, or on top of that, the lies afterward, the lies by Hillary Clinton, perpetuated by the Obama team, by numerous people associated with Obama, that the entire attack on the Benghazi compound was the result of a video someone put out that insulted them, and they were outraged. And it was just an organic uprising, a crowd enraged by a video. And they tried to push that story until they got disproven, until they got shown to be liars. Huge, huge lie of the Obama era. Never accountable, never answered for, never even admitted by the Obama people. Biden has to answer for that. Did he agree with trying to pin it on the tape, or did he know all along, or what was his position? Why didn't he speak up? I also want to mention, as just an utter scandal of the Obama administration, the Iranian deal. The deal where America, along with 4 or 5 other countries, the 5G from the United Nations Security Council plus Germany, those 6 countries cut a deal with Iran that is simply enabled them to develop nuclear weapons, but claiming to be a deal that would prevented them from developing nuclear weapons. A lie in his face, a hoax of a deal. Fortunately, President Trump took us out of that. That, by the way, scandal of the century, the IRS being weaponized against political enemies of the Obama administration. Now just had the IRS, or the government, is going to have to pay a multi-million-dollar settlement to True the Vote. This was the weaponizing of the government against the people, against political opponents under Obama, while Biden sat there in the White House being vice president. And what we're all discovering now is what really happened inside the Department of Justice and the FBI under Obama, targeting American citizens using the NSA database, targeting a political enemy of Trump, all with the mission, the goal of destroying President Trump's candidacy and then his presidency. I could go on and on and on. Oh, Operation Fast and Furious, I'll leave you with that one. The idea that Biden is getting to run with apparently no questions from the media, claiming that the Obama-era administration was free of lies and scandals, is a grotesque lie. Pretty much makes him not worthy of the presidency all by itself. And now, my friends, we'll turn to the end of the day, why it matters to you. And I love telling you, I do this show because America matters and why this matters to you. Trump and foreign supplied information, for crying out loud. Trump's derangement syndrome, hysteria, too mild to describe the mainstream media's anti-Trump attitude, When does a president, cabinet secretary, senator, congressman go running to the FBI every time they talk to a foreigner who conveys information? Information is just information. Wrongdoing requires wrong and doing. That's not what he was asked. He was asked if they knew something, what would you do about it? The mainstream media's silence regarding Hillary's over-the-top solicitation of foreign information to destroy Trump makes the entire Trump-Stephanopoulos ruckus ludicrous on its face. Next slide, sir. Bernie Sanders' eagerness for more taxes, more of your money he would like to have. Bernie's view of what Americans want and need and ought to expect from the government is 180 degrees out of phase. Total opposite of the founding of America, of America's founders, and with economic reality. Statists, socialists, and communists sell an all-powerful government that'll give you everything you need, they believe, and then voters, to get that, surrender their freedom. There's no such thing as a benign, all-powerful government, not ever in history. Last slide. Biden, I thought that was cute. Biden, not a Biden. Why this matters to you? Biden and Obama's 8 years of no scandals is a lie. He needs to refute or own all of them. I didn't mention Mr. Gropey, but Gropey is creepy in this Me Too world. He's still gropey. He hasn't straightened out his act. And big-time flip-flops, didn't even get to this one, but the Hyde Amendment and China, he's done policy reversals, policy flips on big issues in the very short time he's already been running. This from the experienced one. My guess is Biden is going to fade bigly. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Please tune in every day, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time. And we always talk truth about America. I urge you to talk truth about America, defend this precious country from the assaults, the endless assaults and criticisms and lies about America coming out of the American left. Speak up for this precious country because America matters. Have a great weekend. Talk to you Monday.
America, Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you